is, are you a part of the COC? And that is either Christians of convenience or Christians of conviction. So let's go to Esther, the 3rd chapter. Esther 3, verses 7 to 15. I've been kind of working on the message this week, and I've come up with 3 words that I want to challenge us to have. That means me too. And that is conviction, dedication, and determination. So if you're looking on 1, 2, and 3 towards the end of the message, that's where they're going to go. My concern for churches in North America is that the church isn't seen as the vital part of the culture and part of the community that it is. We're seeing church as just being there if we need to go, and its vitality is not seen as being important for our country, because I think where the church dies, the country dies with it. In Russia, I remember one man who was part of the Hitler Youth and was captured in Europe towards the end of World War II. And he was taken over and put into a camp in Britain until after the war, and then he was released. He was talking about how people in Russia, in order to go to church, they had to skirt out of the city into the woods at this one particular church, and they had to have sentries because they were where the KGB was going to come and arrest them and take all of them and put them in an internment camp. So they had to pay a lot of time, sometimes with their lives, to be able to go to church. So I want to encourage us with the great grace that we have in our country to be excited in coming to church, to be excited in sharing our faith, to be moved by God's presence, that we are here as a family of God, and take us beyond convenience to a people of conviction. And I'm not saying that's not happening here, but I'm saying, Lord, keep that conviction growing in our hearts and lives, that we will have not only conviction, but that we're also going to have dedication to our lives, that we are going to be dedicated to Him every day, and we're going to be determined that God is the focal part of my life that is the most important. And I'm sorry, it's not my wife, it's not my family, it's God first. And when I am determined to make God first, everything else is going to fall into place. Everything is going to make sense in our lives. Then we're going to have a passion, and we're going to have a purpose that makes sense. Instead of, well, we eat and drink, for tomorrow we're going to die. So I am hoping that through this message, we're going to see that we don't want to be a people of convenience. I remember, and I won't say what kind of a denomination that is, but I remember going to high school and then going to a certain church that was associated with there, and all it was convenience. We go here and we do this, and then when we're done, we go. We're going home. It's like, let's get this over as quick as possible so I can get back to my life. But if we're living the Christian life, this is part of life. This is coming to celebrate. This is coming to encourage. This is coming to recognize how important that God is, that if it is needful, if we came to church one time, we would be arrested. We would be thankful to God we were arrested because we're doing God's work. Instead of, I'm not going to because it could cost me something. Because Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane was willing to pay what it took to make sure that we have this freedom to do so and have His grace and mercy. So Esther 3 verses 7 to 15. And we're going to find out with Esther, she could have been a person of convenience. She could have hid behind the shadows when all of these problems were going to come. But she decided that she was going to allow God to use her for His honor and His glory. And brethren, I hope that's how we feel. In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot before Haman, from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. We've read this passage, but we're going in a different direction this time. And Haman said to the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad, dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and your laws, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws, therefore it is not the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from off his hand and gave it to Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the king's enemy, the Jews' enemy. You remember? There was someone else who received a ring. Who was that? Joseph, when he became governor. And the king said to Haman, the silver is given to you. The people also do with them as it seems good to you. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, to the governors that were over every province, and over the rulers and every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, in the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Every Jew from that day forward had their name on a list. In the 12th month of that year, they were going to be destroyed. Whether you were a practicing Jew, whether you were an atheistic Jew, whether you went to the synagogue or not, your name was on a list. Makes me think of World War II, when Hitler went and did as many things as he did, and we have Schindler's List. Can you imagine living in a community which is actually not your home, but it's in the Persia or wherever it is, and all of a sudden you receive this declaration by the king's hand that you're going to be put to death on a certain day, and all of the people in the community, they knew who the Jews were, because they have a certain culture, certain religious beliefs, certain mannerisms about the way they knew they were Jews. It's not like they were so blended in with the population that they didn't. They knew who they were. And now all of a sudden you're being told your life is going to be forfeit. And can you imagine, let's say you were a Jewish banker in a local community. You gave out loans, and maybe that's how you made your living. All of a sudden the guys are saying, aha, I owe him $5,000. I don't have to worry about paying him back anymore. He's going to be dead. In fact, maybe some of the people were enemies of the Jews. Maybe we can just hurry this up a little bit. We don't have to wait until that date. We can probably do something now. And you probably got your rulers. You can't go to them for help. There is no help. They have to obey the king's command, which is to allow them to put your people to death. So if you are a believer or you're a person of convenience, your life is on the line. Their distinctiveness is what set them apart. And can you imagine, for 10 months, you're going to be walking day after day saying, what am I going to do? You can't go to Jerusalem. There's going to be no protection in Israel for you. Guess why? The people over there are going to do the same thing as they're going to do in Persia. There's no hiding place. Maybe they're sizing you up for your house. Hey, this guy's got a beautiful ranch-style home and he's got 100 sheep in the backyard. I'm going to put my name in because I want to take his stuff. Because you know what? You take care of those people and you get what they have. I'm targeting this guy because, or can you imagine the kids probably got beat up by bullies or whatever? Because guess why? They know, hey, I can get away with beating up on these people and nothing's going to happen to me because they're already on a list. They're already going to die. You receive threats. Maybe, like I said, some of your enemies are going to be thinking, hey, the early bird gets the worm. I'm going to take out this guy before someone else does and I get his stuff. So you're living in this. You're walking in this. And I think maybe of the Jews at that time, when all of a sudden the hard stuff begins to take place and your name's on the list, you're in a Jewish ghetto somewhere, what are you going to do? I may be a Jew in name, it does not matter. To the Hitler and Nazis, you were a Jew and you were going to be taken care of. Now what about us as Christians? If there was a list, is your name going to be on that list? If they're looking for Christians, are you going to be on there? Or are they going to look and say, well, you know, I don't know. When I see him out there at the job site, he doesn't act like a Christian. Maybe we need to investigate if he really is one or not. Do we privatize our Christian life so that people know or don't know whether we're a Christian or not? Are we people of conviction that people can say, I know that person. I know that person. And he is a God-fearer, he's a believer, whatever it might be called. And I want to be found guilty, if that's the case. I want to be found guilty. Instead of, well, you know, you don't know about you, so we'll let you get away with that. And just for, let me go on a completely different sidebar on this. We're coming up to the election in November. Do you have a conviction to go and vote? Or do you say, whoever gets in office, doesn't matter, nothing's... I think we need to have a good conviction in our civic duties. I'm going to go vote. And you need to know the issues. Because someone paid the price for us to have that. Now, what about a Christian? Someone paid the price for us to call ourselves followers of Jesus. Are we there? Peter was confronted by Jesus, who said, 3 times this night you're going to deny knowing me. Don't you think Peter was brokenhearted when Jesus said that to him? And Jesus was telling the facts. And then Jesus, a 3rd time he denies knowing the Master, goes out and weeps bitterly because he realized he didn't have a conviction that led him say, I'm willing to die for the Master. He said it. And you know what? We all can say, and even to some certain extent of a conviction, yeah, I'm a Christian, but are you willing to pay your life with that conviction? In the Roman Empire in the first 300 years, people were arrested. Many of them suffered horribly. And you know what? They were willing to die for their conviction that it's better to die for Jesus than to live without him. And I want to challenge us. Let's go to Matthew, the 10th chapter, before we get back into Esther in a few minutes. Matthew 10. Brethren, and I am being convicted myself. Am I living the life that Jesus says he is? And remember, I like how God says in many times in the scriptures, Abraham, who was the friend of God. Or God said to Job, have you seen my servant Job? A perfect man and upright, who eschews evil. I want to be in that list where God says, that's my son, and I'm proud of him. I want that. I want that to mean more to me than any other convenient things in life, because, brethren, my conviction is for him. There's a conviction again. There are too many people, and I'm not saying this in our church, but there are too many people out there who say they're a Christian, but they're so surface. It's just a name. It doesn't mean something to them. So Matthew 10, verses 37 to 39. Matthew 10, 37 to 39. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. What is Jesus trying to tell us there? Count the cost. Are you willing to take up that cross and follow him? That's conviction. That is something that sets us apart from a world that is rushing in mad, chaotic ways to get into death. They don't care. We need to be people of conviction who say, you know what? I am not going to do that. I'm willing to stand up and say, are you, if someone would say, well, Sabbath keepers, because you're not doing A, B, and C, would we still go to church on Sabbath? Would they find us here on Sabbath morning? If someone came in the front door and says, okay, everyone's under arrest, would you be thankful and say, God, just like they did in Acts, the 4th chapter, they were beaten for the name of Jesus and they praised God. Would we be thankful that we were found worthy and faithful to him? This is where Esther is. She is to the point where now she is going to have to face the task of either standing up and representing the Jewish people to the king, or she's going to be willing to hide in the shadows. This is not my problem. I'm married to the king. I get a get out of jail free card. No, she's got an issue to go with. Following Jesus is not a life of convenience. It is a life of sacrifice. And brethren, I think that's what we need to realize. We need to be able to do that. What if Jesus comes and says one time, listen, economic problems are coming, all that in your bank is gone. Are we still going to follow Jesus? Are we still going to be convicted when the good times, the economic times are gone in our country? Are we still going to say, well, God still loves me? Are we still saying he still blesses me? These are some questions we have to ask ourselves. And even Jesus goes and says, if you love your father, your mother, your wife, your children more than me, you're not worthy of me. That's the conviction he's trying to give us. My relationship with you, Jesus is saying to us, should matter more than anything else you have in the world. That's it. And if you're not willing to do that, we need to investigate why. We need to make that my focal point in life. So getting back to the story of Esther, we have the danger of Haman's edict to destroy all the Jews. Haman's a very powerful man. She's going to have to go up against him in front of the king. She knows this. It's not that she can hide away somewhere. Or, honey, I'm going on a 6-week vacation out to the French Riviera. I'll get a hold of you later. She's got to face this. So let's go to Esther 4, verses 10 to 17. Esther 4, verses 10 to 17. Now Mordecai has already sent her a letter saying, we got a problem here. And if you think you're going to be able to get away with being in the king's household in the palace, it's not going to work. So verse 10. And Esther spake unto Hatach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king unto the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But we can say, Esther, you're beautiful. The king just loves you. Now look what it says. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. So if we think, hey, everything is, she hasn't seen him for 30 days. Is the king too busy for her? Has he found someone else? She doesn't have an easy step here with the king. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you altogether hold your peace at this time, if you're playing it safe, this is what Mordecai is saying. If you're playing it safe, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house shall be destroyed. And who knows whether you are come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Whenever God is going to use someone, there's a hard test that comes first. Remember with Abraham? What was Abraham's test before he received the great blessings from God? Take your son Isaac. What was it for Moses? You're going to go to Pharaoh. Isn't it interesting? A human tries to convince God something else. That's what he was trying to do. It's going to be the same for us. I think in every place when Jesus called the disciples, he was saying to them, are you willing to follow me and give up everything you have to follow me? It's not something simple. It's not a life of convenience. Then Esther bade them, now here we go. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. This sounds like conviction, doesn't it? It's not convenience. No, I don't want to do that. I want to eat. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. So she's putting her life on the line. And she has to be saying, I'm going to do this with passion in my heart and my life. Who wants to go and die and says, well, I don't care if I have to die, I'm going to die. Intense prayer and fasting. She's at a life of two roads. And also we are. And you know, I'm kind of amazed that we think when we come to Jesus, it's a life of ease. If we're going to walk the way Jesus walked, and we're told to do it in the Bible, his life was not one of ease. It was one of conviction. In John the 2nd chapter, we are given the scenario where Jesus goes to the temple area, and what does he find in the outward court was the Gentile court. The Gentiles could only come into this court to worship. That's the closest they could get, because then you had the court of the women, then you had the court of the men, then you had the court of the priests. So the Gentiles are on the outside. Well, guess what the smart Pharisees decide? They don't care for the Gentiles at all, right? So guess what they do? They set up the marketplace, but where do they do it? In the court of the Gentiles. That's why Jesus comes along and says, my house shall be called a house of prayer for who? All nations. What is he saying? You're in this place for the Gentiles. You're taking their place, and you're robbing people blind by doing what you're doing. Was that conviction? Remember? Psalm 69 verse 9, what does it say? For the zeal of thine house has eaten me up. That's conviction. Jesus could not stand by and watch what they were doing to the temple area. So what does he do? He gets a cord together, and what does he do? He whips those boys pretty good. Would we walk by and say, you know what? I'm not going to mess with the Pharisees. This is going to cause more problems. Jesus couldn't stand by and do that. He had to act because his conviction told him he had to. Are we to the point in our life, have we grown in our spiritual lives where conviction matters more than convenience does? How about Luke 14? Let's go there. Luke the 14th chapter, verses 25 to 33. Luke 14 verses 25 to 33. Well, there's a question that Jesus gives to us. And you know, I'm also reminded of this right now, and I'll talk about this before we get into Luke. Remember what Jesus said to said to Peter at the end of the book of John? When you're old, if I can just paraphrase, you're going to be taken to a place you don't want to go. But what did Jesus tell Peter? Follow me. You're going to have a hard ending to your life, but you follow me. We need to realize that no matter what happens in our life, Jesus is saying, follow me. It's not a life of convenience. It's a life of conviction. So, Luke 14, let's go with verse 25. And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said unto them. Now, it's easy to follow Jesus when he's providing you something to eat. It's easy to follow Jesus when he's healing you or your friends or your family. Sure, it's easy to follow Jesus. Why not? He's given you everything you need. Verse 26, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, in his own life also. What does it say? He's calling us to conviction, not to convenience. And whomsoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. You get the idea what he's telling us here? This is one of the categories that Jesus is presenting to us. Yes, we need to love God with all of our heart and all our soul and all, but he's saying, you have to follow me even if it costs you your very life. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sits not down first and counts the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consults whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is a great way off, he sends ambassage and desires conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsakes not all that he has cannot be my disciple. That's conviction. And I am not asking all of us, okay, I want you to go sell your houses after the Sabbath, give all your money to the poor. That's not what I'm saying is we have to be ready to do that. If I am not willing to give my life to Jesus, I cannot be his disciple. It reminds me of Elijah the prophet when he is standing on Mount Carmel and he says to the people over there, how long do you halt between two opinions? If Jehovah is God, follow him. But if it's Baal, follow him. Make a decision. And then stick to it. And it's the same with us. If Jesus is who he is, we need to make the decision. He is, and I'm following him. If it means me losing friends, if it means me losing my job, I'm willing to do that. So I would like to end with 3 points. Let's go back to Esther, the 4th chapter, verse 16. And brethren, I hope you know that I'm not trying to pick on anyone here. I'm just trying to say we need to be ready at all times to say, okay, Lord, here I am. Here I am. Let's go with verse 16 one more time. In regards to conviction versus convenience. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan. Why? Their lives are on the line. Not only hers, all their lives are on the line. And fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will also fast likewise. And I will go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So point number 1 is conviction. Esther is going to seek divine favor from God. I have nothing else to do, but I've only got one way to go, and that's to the king. Mordecai has already told her that you need to go to the king. So passion is good, but it must be under the guidance of God. She could have had passion and say, I'm going to kill Haman. Or I'm going to leave. My passion is to save my own life. I'm going to go. So your passion is good, but it must be under the control of God. She realized the people needed her. And she needed to step up to the plate and say, I'm going to answer. She recognized that the power of God was greater than the power of the king. So her conviction is, I'm going to do this. But what does she do? She acts in faith, which is called dedication. I am dedicating 3 days, night and day, where I'm not going to eat or drink. Can you imagine? She's asking everyone to do that. Can you imagine saying to your 7-year-old son or daughter, we're not going to eat for the next 3 days, night or day? Are you willing to do that? Convenience says, why do I need to? I can save my life. I'll do some. She's asking everyone to be dedicated to a fast, which is 3 days and 3 nights. And it's not only her maidens, but all the people that are there. And you know what they're actually doing? They're fasting for everybody in the empire. She can't go to everybody in the empire who's in Israel and say, will you fast? Because guess what? The time's gone by the time the message gets over there. So they're fasting not only for themselves, they're fasting for everyone. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever fasted and prayed for someone who was sick beside yourself? Why? Because you're convicted and dedicated to the thought that God's going to listen to your prayer and accept your fasting as something that He will work with. So she will act in faith. That's dedication. And then point number 3 is determination. I am going to go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. She was determined. That's why I like our hymn that we had just before. It had all the elements in that song. And I thought, boy, that's a good song. She was determined. If I die, I've already given my life to God. I'm done. I've already consecrated my heart to Him. I'm dedicated, I'm convicted, and I'm determined. I'm going to live and die for God. We need to be that same way too. Why do you think we have in Fox's Book of Martyrs where they've got these people put on the stake in Rome and wax poured upon these people, and they start a slow fire, and the people are singing praises to God while all this is taking place? You know why? They were dedicated, they were convicted, and they were determined to live for God. We haven't been called to do that. I will hasten to Him, hasten. You know, I love that song because it's saying exactly what I want to do. I am determined that God is going to live through my life, and it doesn't matter what is the cost. I'm determined. Let's close with Deuteronomy 11, verse 13. Deuteronomy 11, verse 13. There is an answer. Well, Pastor, how can I do this? How can I do all these things you're talking about? Deuteronomy 11, verse 13. You know, let's start with verse 12. Because each one of these issues of conviction, dedication, and determination are found in these two verses here. Deuteronomy 11, verse 12. And now, Israel, what does the Lord thy God require of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all His ways, and to love Him, and to serve the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, to keep the commandment of the Lord and His statutes, which I command you this day for your good. All of these elements are in there. He wants us to be convicted by what? Our love and fear of God. That we're going to walk with Him all the days of our lives. We're going to be dedicated to keeping His laws. And we're going to be determined to keep them. So all these three elements are in here. If you say, well, I love the Lord God with all my heart, my soul, and my mind, then conviction, dedication, and determination will be seen in your life. Because you know why? Serving God and loving Him is the most important thing in your life. And all those elements are going to be in your heart. And may the Lord find us faithful in doing so. Father in heaven, we are living in an age of convenience where we're willing just to do enough to get things done, just to pass that line. You called us to greater. You said, worship you with all of our heart, with all our soul, with all of our might. You're not asking for 10% or 15%. You're asking for 100% all the time. And we can't do that without you. So give to us the Spirit and the power and your love, that we will be committed, convicted, dedicated, and determined Christians to serve you. Because you're not looking for any less. That way on Judgment Day, when we see our Master, He will say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joys of the Lord. Why? Because if we are committed to you with all of our heart, with all of our love, we will be doing what you've asked us to do. We ask all this in Jesus' name, amen.